Welcome to the next episode of Kate's Food Fiesta. Today, as I'm filming this, it's coming up to Christmas, so I thought I would do, people like to entertain and have guests over, so I thought I'd do a dish called bruschetta, which I think most people would know, an Italian appetizer that is just, it's really flavoursome and really easy to make and good for entertaining. You can sort of portion it out and have it in little bite-sized morsels for this really delicious food. Here we have our ingredients that are going to make up this delicious bruschetta. So we have some really nice red ripe tomatoes here. Technically supposed to put Roma tomatoes in bruschetta, I think, but I just bought what was available and what was in season. And then we've also got this fresh basil. This basil looks beautiful. It's really green and fleshy leaves. So this is going to be really lovely with the tomatoes. They also grow really together in a garden if anyone has a green thumb. We've got some garlic here as well, which is going to be minced up. We've got some onion that's going to be really finely sliced and diced. Those will all go in together with a little bit of salt and pepper and some olive oil to make the topping, and then the bruschetta will be made on this bread. So I've bought this is a sourdough. You could use a pane de casa or a ciabatta, but you want it to be quite a dense bread to sort of hold that topping on it when you serve it. So now I'm going to start a little bit of preparation on this delicious bruschetta. It's one of my favourite things. So with the tomatoes, you want to make sure that they're not too ripe, because if they're too ripe, they're a bit mushy and they'll just sort of make a bit of a sloppy mess. So we want the tomatoes to be firm enough to sort of hold their form. What I'm just going to show you is when we do these tomatoes, you'll see there's all of this, I don't even know what this stuff's called, but all the stuff in the middle, it's quite wet where all the seeds sit in and the membrane and whatever. So you actually don't want this to go into the bruschetta. So what you basically do is you cut your tomato into quarters, as I've just done, and you basically sort of cut down at the end where the membrane joins, and you sort of press down flat. You sort of flatten the knife to sort of scoop out this tomato seed bit, and I just sort of cut it through then so that you sort of get all of that seedy bit removed, and then you kind of scoop it out with your fingers, get your hands in there. But then, so this is the part of the tomato that we want for the bruschetta. We don't want all of this watery, like I said, I don't even know what it's called. But yeah, I'm just cutting that out now, getting rid of all of that, so that I've got these bits of tomato that I'm going to be making up my bruschetta. So you see the membrane doesn't even join on some parts, so you just sort of scoop it out and just make sure that you get rid of all of that watery stuff. And that is just going to go in the bin, or if you have a compost, it might be really good to put it into a compost bin, back into nature. So with this tomato now, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to slice it up into little pieces. Now I like my bruschetta quite reasonably finely chopped. I don't like massive big pieces of tomato in it. I think that it sort of makes it, I don't know, it's a texture thing for me. I just really like it. And so then we just pop that into the bowl, and then we go on to the next one. You do lose a bit of your bulk, I guess, by getting rid of that middle part. So you probably will need a few more extra tomatoes than you might think. But the good thing about this salad is you could literally make it with one tomato and you'd be able to serve it up for maybe 2 people. It'd probably do enough to make a little appetizer for 2 people if you're having a little private dinner for 2. Start by cutting the tomato in quarters like this. Taking each quarter, you cut through the bottom where the membrane joins. You flatten the knife almost horizontally to move through the seed section. Cut through the top part where the stem would join, and then you use your fingers, or you can use a spoon to scoop out the excess seeds. A little tip, if you're using cherry tomatoes, you probably don't need to worry about this step at all. So now I'm just going to do some prep on the delicious basil. I love the smell of basil. As soon as you press the leaves, it just becomes so aromatic. So basically, you don't want to be using any of the stems. You really only want to be using the leaves. So you're just going to be plucking all the leaves off. You can use the little leaves as well, the big and little ones. Don't need to waste any of this. Basil doesn't keep that long in the fridge either. So when you buy it, if you're not growing it, if you're buying it, you do need to sort of, I guess, make sure that you try and use it up within a few days, because it doesn't seem to last very long in the refrigerator. You could possibly, put it in a jar of water on your sink as well. That would make it last maybe a little bit as well. But if you're growing it in your garden, then obviously you just go and pick whatever you need. So you can see I'm just plucking the leaves. And if you tear them, when you tear basil, as opposed to cutting it, it actually seems to burst the flavour more and the aroma more through the foods as well. So we are going to cut it somewhat, but we're also going to be tearing it to sort of release those flavours. So just tear it up into some little chunks. As I said, that really releases that aroma. It sort of bruises the leaf a little bit more. There's quite a lot of herbs that actually just straight cutting them doesn't release the fragrance as much. That said, we are also going to cut it, as I mentioned, so I'm just gonna, you don't have to be too precise about it. So now I've got all the tomatoes, I've popped in the basil, I've done some finely chopped red onions in there. All we need now is a little bit of garlic and some salt and pepper and some olive oil. I've got my garlic here, so I'm just going to mince this down. My favourite zester for my garlic. I haven't got that much ingredients here, so you've got to be a little bit careful. You don't want to be putting over garlicking it. I mean, unless you really like garlic, then maybe that's fine. But we'll just pop that in there. A little bit of salt and pepper and some olive oil. Now I'll put all the measurements that I recommend, but it's a bit of this, bit of that, bit of taste. A little bit of salt and pepper in there. Tomatoes always need salt and pepper as far as I'm concerned. But again, just doing that to taste. And then we'll just mix that in. Now, the most important part of this step now is actually allowing it to rest. This needs a little bit of time for the flavours to really infuse through. The basil and the garlic and all to really heighten its intensity. Now it's time to make the bruschetta bases, so the bread that we're just going to put a little bit of oil on. We're going to toast them in the oven so they get nice and crispy. So all you do with your bread, you want to reasonably thick slices, maybe about 1 centimetre. It just gives you more of a base to put it on, and the juices from the tomato salad will sort of soak into it but not sort of drip through. So I'm just going to do a few pieces here. I'm doing that on an angle because, it just looks nice, pretty much. But yeah, but a good thing to use when you're trying to cut bread is you want like a serrated knife and sort of saws through the bread. If you ever try and use a straight blade, you'll end up just pressing through the bread really. So basically we've just got those there now. And as I said before, we really need this to be a fairly dense sort of bread to toast it up really nicely. I'm not going to do too much of this today. You see there'd be a really nice little serving size for a party or something, or a barbecue or a dinner perhaps. I'll do one more there. And then all I've got, so I actually really like using olive oil spray. I just find it really easy and it just disperses the oil really evenly. So I'm just going to spray these with a little bit of oil. That's all they need, a couple of seconds. And then we're going to pop those in the oven, and then we're going to, when they're ready, it's only going to be for about maybe 8 to 10 minutes. And they will then be nice and crisp and crunchy and ready for that bruschetta topping to go on there. Here we have the little toasties that I've done for this bruschetta, so you can see that they're a little bit crispy and crunchy. I quite like them like that, sort of gives them that real bite and that texture. So I've also had the bruschetta mix. I've been marinating for a couple of hours. I actually marinated in, so long as it's not too hot a temperature in Australia, I'll marinate it at room temperature. It just seems to bring the flavours, seems to do it a bit more quickly. And also when you serve this, you don't want it to be cold on toast. It's sort of, I mean you can, but I think it's a nicer flavour if it's more room temperature. And honestly, all you do now is you're just going to scoop this onto your toasts. So easy. Looks good, great colours. It falls off here and there, doesn't matter. Okay, so here we have our bruschetta done. It's almost like a little Christmas wreath of bruschetta for the Christmas season. But this is just going to be super tasty. Making sure you put that tomato on there just as you're about to serve it. But I'm actually going to have a piece because it's delicious. So it's good. Thanks for joining me.